But to change topics, Josh, you were talking about, giving people something to vote for and giving people at least some hope of a better future, which ties in nicely to a project that you've been working on throughout much of this year that I've been following, and I'm glad we finally have a chance to get you on here. Could you just kick it off for us? What is Measure B going on in Los Angeles, and why are you devoting so much time to this?
Yeah, Measure B is a very simple amendment to the Los Angeles Charter that would make it possible to create a public bank. That's it. That's all it does. It doesn't put any money towards anything. It just simply removes one regulatory hurdle, allowing for the ability for Los Angeles to be the first city in the history of America to vote to take our public money out of the Wall Street hell labyrinth.
How does this currently work? Like the city of Los Angeles is the second largest city in America and is basically manages around $9 billion in revenue that's connected through taxation. How do they like? How is that money currently managed, and how would a public bank change that?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't like think about this, but a city, right, when they take your tax dollars, they need to start a bank account. And just like you and your bank account, they get fucked like constantly, brutally, over and over and over by the banks to
Those
the tune
ATM
of,
fees.
to the tune of $100 million a year in fees alone. That's just fees. And then when you bring in interest, which if you have any experience with a loan or a credit card, you know how you get fucked by interest. The city of Los Angeles owes over $3 billion a year in interest and pays over $1 billion. And it just puts the other couple billion on a little ledger sheet. So we're fucked in the future.
This Measure B is on the ballot. This is a measure that people in Los Angeles are going to vote on the 6th, right?
Yes.
All right, so let's say it passes on the 6th. Setting up this public bank, like what would that actually entail, and how does a public bank work differently from, like, let's say, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, or Chase?
Right. So a bank, right, by virtue of being a bank, is able to loan out 10 times its capital base and loan out 90% of its deposits. That's a very shitty flaw in banking. And that's what directly led to the 2008 financial crisis, because 90% of the deposits were gambled on these risky loans. And then the loans couldn't get paid back and the banks went under. So a public bank would be able to loan out this money to not risky things like, infrastructure improvements and shit like that. Like right now, beyond the risky loans, our tax dollars, like if you go buy a fucking ice cream in Los Angeles, your sales tax goes to finance pipelines, to finance private prisons, including the very cages that separate undocumented children from their families. We're talking guns, tobacco, just like the worst shit. Like if you could imagine a horrible thing, odds are that's where it goes. And a public bank would place transparency and accountability into this process so that the people of Los Angeles would effectively become the shareholders and thereby be able to prioritize where this money is invested and be able to restrict investment from these horrible extractive policies.
So, like, when you pay sales tax, like you are also funding, child prisons or guns or things like that. That's just by virtue of what every commercial bank is already invested in.
Yeah, literally, like just, they say there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, and that is very literal in this case.
Another issue to deal with this public banking thing in California is what is the weed connection to all this, man?
Yeah. Well, so actually, it's funny. That's sort of how it started, right? That's how the public banking movement gained traction, at least when it comes to elected officials. Um, on the activist and organizer side, it grew from the divestment movement out of Standing Rock. But the big THC man has a lot of VC money, and so they saw public banking as the solution to the current crisis of just fucking not being able to deposit all this cash, because a public bank would not be FDIC insured, and therefore it would not have to go through any sort of federal regulations, meaning, Jeff Sessions wouldn't be able to just steal it and use it to make a rocket to shoot into a historically black college. So like the the cannabis issue is something that we think like public banking can offer a solution, but honestly, the cannabis people have enough money, they have enough lobbyists that is going to be solved. And at this point right now, we're not really focusing on cannabis. We're focusing more on community development.
Lame. Sounds boring.
I want to be able to walk into my bank branch and immediately chief. This is bullshit.
Yeah, Josh, I like a public bank. I don't want a toaster. If I'm in a public bank in LA, I want that loud. I want that strong ass pack. I want a free eighth when I open a checking account with the public bank.
Done. And
can you make that
because
happen?
you asked for it, I'm making it happen. Well,
Hell yes.
But when I say that though, when I open a checking account with the public bank, like would any citizen of Los Angeles be able to go into the LA public bank and keep their, just deposit money into a checking or a savings account with that bank?
So at first, no, because that is an incredibly costly service, right? To provide checking and like savings for just like commercial reasons. We do believe that it should get to that point, and we're modeling it off of the very successful German Sparkasse, which, as I mentioned before, funds 70% of their renewables. It's also the bank of first resort for Germany and has been since, hundreds of years, I think, over 100 years. So the answer is eventually, yes, you will be able to. At first, we think that we're going to, this is a very like complicated and serious issue. And so we don't want to bite off more than we can chew.
Right.
But right now there's 600,000 people in Los Angeles, mostly people of color, that are unbanked, and they're getting preyed on by payday lenders. And so, eventually, yes, within a couple years, we hope we will be able to do this.
I mean, and this is part of like, like it would be like an important test case for Los Angeles, second largest city in America. But this is part of like a broader thing about creating about banking as a public institution rather than essentially a privatized casino. Like that's what we're talking about. Like banking as a kind of something that everyone needs, whether it's a municipality or an individual, but it like needs to be run as a kind of shared public institution in which there is, as you said, kind of democratic transparency and control over how that money is lent and what it's used for versus JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, that, let's be honest, are almost entirely criminal and fraudulent organizations.
Yeah, exactly. There's you can't fucking call Lloyd Blankfein or Jamie Dimon, and be like, yo, hey, can you make sure to not spend my tax dollars on imprisoning children in cages? Thanks, dog. Like that doesn't happen. There's no way. And the government has proven time and time again, our federal government, that they're not going to regulate these people. And so why are we giving these translucent millionaires, these blood-sucking frauds, all of this power, the power to decide where billions of dollars are invested? Why are we allowing them to fucking hoover billions from each and every city? And so municipal public banking works because it bypasses our broken federal legislative branch, and it allows cities and communities to assert their own power.
So, Josh, like as you make the case for Measure B and like the idea of a public bank in Los Angeles, like seems like a self-evidently good thing to me, but obviously, like, you guys are going to get a lot of pushback on this. And I guess I'm interested in, like, what are some of the arguments against public banking? Where do they come from? And what are the sort of the lines that they take when they try to convince people to vote no on B?
So the biggest one we've seen so far, and this is a pretty typical conservative talking point, which is, oh, yeah, you're going to really trust these clowns in city council to run the bank? And the answer is no. This is a new institution that is going to have demographic representation, and we're going to have worker controls be put in. We're going to have the people, the workers of the bank themselves have a say. We're going to appoint experts in affordable housing, in homelessness activism, and renewable energy and green energy activism to the board to make sure that there is community development. And also, even if you take that argument at face value, right? Like, oh, you're going to really trust the government? Yes, I trust them more than I trust the guys currently running the banks.
Well, I don't know. What are you talking
about? I can vote these dudes out.
You don't trust Wells Fargo, who just likes to open accounts in your name without your knowledge so that they can charge you a bunch of fucking fees that you don't know about until they've already accumulated? You don't trust those? I trust those guys. Sorry, buddy.
No, Josh.
It's so funny that those commercials where they're apologizing.
Oh, they're so good.
We'll do better.
They're so good. And they show like slow motion footage of like, the old timey like horse and buggy, like Wells Fargo covered wagons. And I just want to like tell whoever's making those commercials, like, hey, maybe showing a terrified animal with blinders on being whipped by a rich old white guy doesn't exactly say we're not going to force our employees to break the law anymore.
Josh, I saw one of those commercials the other week, and it was like, again, it was like a period piece commercial, and they were like, last time there was a run on the banks, Wells Fargo let all our customers reopen their accounts based on a handshake and their word alone. Like, and we're continuing that tradition today. Sorry about that other stuff, folks, but we're going back to what started us here.
Yeah, we got to go back 100 years to show the one good thing we've ever done.
I sure would appreciate it if y'all took a gander at our paste bin. We sure are plump sorry about
savings
everything.
Account.
But Josh, I remember I was listening to a radio hit that you shared that was sort of like a debate with one of the Measure B, like one of the experts or people who are advocating for this public bank, and then someone who is essentially like a representative of, like, I don't know, the Orange County Better Business Consumer Bureau or whatever, some fucking ghoul. And like the main line of attack on the idea of a public bank that this guy came out with was, like you said, do you think the LA city government is going to run a bank better than, do they know more about banking than bankers? And I'm just like, he said, name one thing that the LA city government is good at. And it was like, what? And you're like, why would you expect them to be good at banking? But what that doesn't address is, bankers aren't fucking good at banking. They wreck the world economy with this bullshit. What are they good at doing other than, like you said, ripping people off, making their employees commit fraud in the names of their customers, and, like I said, generally just sucking all of the life and vitality out of the human species and planet?
This is not a piggy bank for city council or the mayor. This is like an institution, first and foremost, that's going to have a very strict charter that is going to be its main point of governance, right? Like the charter is something that we believe is going to be voted on by the people. Like, this isn't the only vote, right? Like, there's going to be other referendums and other ballot measures. And that charter is going to very strictly restrict investments in things we don't want and prioritize investments in the things we do want, so that the actual humans that are running this bank won't be able to be corrupt. And when you look at the only existing bank in the continental United States, public bank in the existing continental United States, it's the Bank of North Dakota, of all places.
Mm-hmm.
And that bank it weathered the 2008 crisis. It has a better credit rating than JP Morgan Chase. And it has never had like a huge corruption scandal, even coming close to what Wells Fargo's come to in its 100 years of existence.
That's my favorite thing. Is the same thing goes for shit like Medicare for All. These guys, their main argument is, you're a fucking moron to think this thing that other places do successfully for fucking decades or centuries is possible here. It's just like you basically are preying on people's absolute ignorance of anything outside of their personal purview, because these are not like fantasy ideas. They exist successfully everywhere in the world.
Josh, I just looked this up. This is from The Hill from 5 days ago. A public bank is risky business by Rob Nichols, opinion contributor. He says, it also says, who would oversee this new bank? The proposed public bank would not have the FDIC insurance that consumers expect, meaning that their deposits would be protected not by the trusted FDIC, but by state or local politicians. Without professional regulators overseeing the bank, would it be swayed by the politically connected to make excessively risky loans? Think about writing that if you're the head of the American Banking Association. The banking sector is not well regulated.
No.
It blew a giant hole in the world economy. Let's be honest, they're probably going to do it again
it's
in
happening.
the next couple years.
Yes,
If you
4
look at,
years,
like,
4 or 5 years.
all those risky mortgages, that's all coming back.
Oh, it's happening right now, yeah.
Risky. I mean, again, I know this was only 10 years ago, but after they just literally shot a load over the entire world economy, the U.S. taxpayer made them whole.
Yep.
Made them whole again, and then no homeowner was bailed out.
Oh, no.
You know,
No.
like all the people who were ruined by the people who use commercial banks or
Yeah.
get loans from them, they weren't helped out. But all of the giant, too big to fail the banks were made whole again, specifically with taxpayer money because they are politically connected. Look every single person who has been charged of the U.S. Treasury Department comes out of either Goldman Sachs or another one of these huge fucking financial institutions.
Draculus.
Yeah, they are thick as thieves. And you want to talk about political influence over our banking system? Out of
Tim
here.
Geithner basically ignored an order from Barack Obama to actually like start thinking about breaking up the banks. He just did what like Madison, those guys do when Trump says that they need to send SEAL Team 6 to kill the Hamburglar. He said, yeah, we're not doing that. And then he just slow rolled him and basically glad handed him until like he got distracted by other things. Because that was the priority of the fucking banking industry.
They were given everything they asked for without a single string attached. And even that wasn't enough for them. And these people, I mean, they can't even countenance the thought of competition from the form of a municipal public bank in Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's horseshit. And here's the other thing, right? Like, North Dakota has the healthiest community banking system in the country because guess what happens when there's a public bank? Local community banks are able to share risk with the public bank, thereby allowing for student loan debt refinancing, which would drastically improve the lives of millions of Californians and Angelinos. We would be able to help risk share so that we could put a death blow to, payday lenders and their 200% interest loans. Like all this shit could go away, which actually helps bankers in the community that the only people it hurts is these Wall Street plutocrats.
But like, if we expand the idea of a public bank to a national level and conceived of something like a U.S. national public bank that you mentioned that every citizen would be a shareholder in, what are the actually revolutionary implications of that idea?
What it does is it places power in the form of money, right, in the hands of people. And I personally and we at Public Bank LA are advocating for municipal public banks because we believe that when you get closer to the street level, you have more of a say. It's easier to influence what's happening at the city level or community level, county level, than it is at the state or federal level. And the implications of having this, I mean, this is almost like, direct democracy. Ultimately, we're just cutting out the Wall Street middleman and passing the savings on to you. This would allow for the massive climate infrastructure spending that we need if our country is going to exist, if our world is going to exist in 40 years. And we're doing all this without raising taxes.
And, I mean, just like, again, more broadly speaking here, I think like so much of this idea about what the banks do is just so complicated and you really need experts who are, have been banking families for 3 or 4 generations to, really run the economy. Depends on this idea that this mystification of the economy, that the economy is just money and people who have more money necessarily should run the economy. And like the economy isn't money. The economy is everyone in our society. There is no economy without the people in a country and their time and activity and time and labor. That's what the economy is. And there would be none of it without all of us. So I think we all deserve some kind of share and say in that money that we generate to keep this whole fucking thing going.
Also, it's the only way we're going to get anywhere close to the sort of workers and citizen control of the actual mechanisms of production that is necessary to, as you say, survive as a species. Because if we just allow the fucking logic of capitalism to continue dictating these choices, it's just going to burn us to death, literally. Like, we have to take control of these reins, and things like public banking are really sort of the grassroots expression of that, and a chance for people to really get it through their head that they have the ability to do this stuff, that it isn't some sort of occult mystical path that only the adept, only somebody who's been to like the Wharton school and put their dick in the mouth of a dead pig can actually handle. That this is stuff that all of us have a right and a responsibility and frankly a necessity to engage with.
We don't work in factories. Most people don't work in factories in America anymore. And what are you going to reclaim? Your laptop? Like, reclaiming the means of production in the 21st century is reclaiming the mechanism of finance. And that is the power, right? The bank's power is to call debt an asset. To be able to call a loan an asset that's how the banks literally create money, right? You all put your money in the bank in the form of a deposit, and then they are able to take that 90% of that deposit and snap their fingers and create a loan with it and call it an asset, which gives them so much more power than any other institution as when it comes to financing. And so what we are doing is we are essentially giving the power of that to the people to be able to not only gain the fruits of their labor, but to reclaim the means of production, and in this case allow us to produce all of this green infrastructure that we need. And that green infrastructure coming from the public sector will mean so many more good union jobs. Like, it's a win-win for anybody unless you're a sideways blinking Wall Street lizard.
All right. Josh, before I get to this week's reading series for you, I just want to ask, like, do you have any idea of what the polling looks like this? Like, are you optimistic going into Election Day?
So we are optimistic because this does not require any spending, right? This is just the first step. We have not raised enough money to get a poll done. And really our big, sort of the thing that we're bumping up against is we just need to be able to tell people and educate people about this. And pretty much everybody we talk to agrees. So what we need desperately is money to reach people. And if you could go to bit.ly/yesonb-la, and I'm sure you'll put that link in there. We need the cash to be able to spend on ads and educate voters. Because we were endorsed by the LA County Democratic Party, by DSA LA, by Our Revolution, and the United Teachers Los Angeles, various labor groups, and that's really helpful. But for the majority of people, it's scary to hear, like, wait a minute, what? You want to start a bank? And so we need to explain to people, like, well, the reason why is because we're getting fucked. And I don't think you're really aware of how dire the situation is. So we really need folks' help from all around the country because, like you said, this is a test case. And if this succeeds, then this could be a domino effect akin to the Fight for 15, where all of a sudden you start seeing public banks pop up all over the country.
Well, to that end, we will certainly have links in the show description. And also, I think we should clip just this part of the show and make it into a YouTube video that will be shareable, hopefully viral content for anyone who is interested in this topic and needs podcast morons to explain it to them.
Mamma mia, Papa Pia, give me the